Hey, this is Bill from Tutor Bros. Today I want to go over how to use a VLOOKUP in Microsoft Excel. So let's say we're given this data set. It has a unique identifier, a first name, an amount past due, and a phone number. So we're a collection agency, say. And you're given these three IDs that are found somewhere in this list, and we want to return the information associated with each ID, the name, amount due, and phone number. So to do this, you can use a VLOOKUP to help find that info quickly, and we can show how to use it here. So let's just start writing the formula, which is VLOOKUP. And the V stands for vertical because it's looking values up and down columns versus an H lookup, which looks up values horizontally or across rows. So the VLOOKUP equals VLOOKUP open parentheses has four arguments. The first argument is the lookup value. So this is the value that we have that we want to look up somewhere in this list. So that's the ID value in cell G4. That's the first argument. And then we'll do comma. The second argument is the table array. Now, here we want to highlight the columns that first we'll start with the column that has the ID we're looking up. You always want to start with the value you're trying to find, that particular column. So we start with A and we'll drag over to B because we're trying to return the name associated with that ID. So these are the two columns that we need, A and B, and we highlight both of them to make the table array argument within this function. So once we have that, we can hit comma, and then the third argument is the column index number. This is a number that we have to input, basically saying which column do you want to return. So you read it from left to right. A is column 1 in this case, and B is column 2. So we're looking up column A, and we want to return the associated value in column B. So for the column index number, we put 2. That's the third argument. And then the fourth argument can be one of two values, true or false. True matches numbers to the approximate value. So in this case, we want to use false because we want it to match exactly. You'll use true if you have kind of a list of numbers and you want to match the closest number and then return a value associated with that closest number. It's an approximate. In this case, and in many use cases in real life, I find that I use false more often. So for this example, we'll use the false value for the fourth argument in the VLOOKUP. And then you can close parentheses and hit enter, and it returns the name Steve associated with this ID. So instead of retyping all that out for the next two, I can hover over the bottom right box where the formula is, and you get this black cross. If you click and hold it and then drag down, it'll drag the formula down, and it changes the value you're looking up based on the row that you drag down. So I dragged it down one and it dropped one row down. Same with Andrew. Drag the formula down and it drops one row down for the ID that it's looking up. However, it keeps the A and B the same because these are columns. So it'll change the row you're referencing, but not the columns. So in this case, it returns the name for the associated ID for that particular VLOOKUP. So let's say we also wanted to look up the amount due. Again, we can use a VLOOKUP function to help us find that. So equals VLOOKUP. The lookup value that we're looking up here is the ID. And then we hit comma for the second argument, the table array. Now in this case, I'm starting to look up the ID, but I'll drag it all the way over to C because I want the amount due returned. I wouldn't drag it over to B because I need the info from C. So I start with the value I'm looking up in A, and I drag it to C, which is the value I want returned. So the table array is columns A through C here. And then I'll hit comma, and then the third argument is the column index. So we want the value returned that has the amount due, which is in column C, and we started with A. So rather than 2, we will enter the number 3 because we're doing columns A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. And we want to return the amount due based on the associated ID. So we'll enter 3 here, and we hit comma, and then we want it to match exactly again because it's a unique identifier. So we'll type out the word false, and then we can end parentheses and hit enter. And the amount due that's returned for this particular account is $798. So I can drag that down as well, and it looks up the corresponding ID in the next each successive row. So then the final information we want returned is the phone number for this ID. So if I do equals VLOOKUP, again, the lookup value is the ID. We'll do comma. The second argument is the table array. We want to start with the value we're looking up, that column, which is A. We'll drag it all the way, we'll click hold, drag it over to D, which is the phone number. So the table array is columns A through D. And then we'll hit comma, and then the third argument for this function is the column index number. So D is the fourth column in this particular array. And then we'll hit comma, and we want it to match exactly. So we'll type out the word false. And we'll end parentheses and hit enter, and it returns the phone number associated with that ID. So I can drag that formula down as well, and it looks up the phone number for each ID. So that is how you use the VLOOKUP in Microsoft Excel.